Hey everybody, it's Brian McCarthy at Compass, and today I am asking you a very important question, which is, are you believing the gossip or are you following the data of this real estate market right now? I'm asking you guys this question today because it is on the top of everyone's minds. If you were even not in the real estate game right now, but especially if you are, thinking about moving, maybe you have a house that you're concerned with all the headlines that are swirling around that maybe you're going to lose value. Your asset is going to lose a bunch of value here over the next couple months or couple years, or maybe you're a buyer thinking about buying. And what you're seeing or what you're hearing on the surface is that prices are going to come down, places are going to lose value. So it's going to be better to buy in a couple months or in a year because prices are going to be better. And today I am here with the data, with the facts to show you what I'm seeing and actually the evidence behind what is a very contrary feeling to what those headlines are so that you can make up your own mind and your own decision about whether or not this is a good time to move and what this real estate market is going to do for the rest of this year and for the next year or two down the future. So today, I'm sharing with you, the latest data for August for what we have here going in to the rest of the year, the second half of the year. Very important question on everyone's mind. What is happening in the current housing market beyond the headlines, right? Try to find a good spot for my picture here. All right, the first important thing to follow here is weekly mortgage rates. In one word, they are volatile. As you can see, though, generally in this chart that basically tracks everything every week, is that the general trend here is mortgage rates are going up as the Fed increases borrowing rates, interest rates. That does affect mortgage rates as well. We have seen, this data is actually a couple of weeks old now because the most recent number was August 4th, and here we are at least halfway through August. But as you can see over on this side, they actually came down for a little while. Now they're back up. A 30-year fixed rate mortgage is about 5.7 as of this morning. And I'll go over that a little bit later on, but it's volatile. It keeps going up and down, but what I tell people, and this conversation I keep having with buyers that are in the market but not sure if it's a good time to buy, like, oh, maybe I'll wait a little while for mortgage rates to come down. You know what? Mortgage rates are what they are, and what they were last year and at the beginning of this year, in 3% range, was an artificially low rate before the Fed started doing something about our inflation. They are going to stay high for a while. There is going to be a new normal that is closer to what they are right now. So get pre-approved, stay in the market, and you will get locked into a rate that is fair and will be fair for the rest of the foreseeable future, because we are not going to see below threes probably for several decades unless some other pandemic or worldwide crisis happens, God forbid. That's not a good thing, right? It's probably only good for mortgage rates, but not good for the rest of the economy or the world. So this new normal is going to be around 5% or somewhere in there. Is there a recession around the corner? So this is a big concern. People think that a recession equals housing prices going down, or this is going to be bad for the housing market. And that just simply is not true. This is just the chart that's tracking the percentage of economists that were surveyed from every month, but over the past year, who see a recession in the next 12 months. Well, that went from this time last year, July 2021, from 12% of those economists that they survey to almost half of them now think that a recession is coming up in the next 12 months. You know what? Not necessarily a good or a bad thing. It literally just means a slowdown in the economy, is not necessarily a bad thing for the housing market. And I'm going to show you why. So big question here, how would a housing market be impacted by a recession? Well, what we can do is look at the past 6 most recent recessions and how they impacted the market. And if you've been following me, this chart is not a new one. And I like it because it goes back to before I was born. The recession in the 80s, there was a couple there, 90s and in the 2000s. And during every single one of the last recessions, or 4 out of the 6, housing prices actually increased. And in 2008, which is kind of an anomaly if you think about it, the recession was caused by the housing market crashing. And that is, I call it an anomaly because everything about that market is different than what it is now, even though we're maybe heading into a recession. I'm not going to argue that point. Maybe we are in one. That's not the argument I'm making. It's really irrelevant when it comes to the housing market. But we can kind of take 2008 as a silo and take that off the chart. And if we look at the other 5, the only one that had a negative impact on housing prices was in 1991, and it only went down 2%. Everything else went up by at least 3.5%, and 3 out of the 6 went up by over 6%. That's housing prices. A big reason why this housing market is much different from the one in 2008 is the amount of supply. And this is another big reason why that we aren't expecting housing prices to decrease. So leading up to the housing crisis in 2008 and the economy taking a big dump like it did, you can see here the total housing inventory in those 4 years, 2007, 8, 9, 10, and 11, was huge. There was a ton of inventory on the market, new inventory, resales. Everyone was moving. Everyone wanted to do something in the housing market, move, sell, buy. There was just a lot of supply, and it has been diminishing ever since then. And the past couple of years, it's below 3%. Even today, we're just at 3. And so they say a balanced market is about 6. Well, we're half of that right now, and we're at a third of the housing supply that was happening during that last big housing crash there in 2008. So very different market from what it was there. And if we really want to dumb this down, and it's a very, very true argument, the housing market is all about supply and demand, and this is the supply. When supply is very low, and you're especially in an area like we are here in North Jersey, if you're here or pretty much anywhere in the country, actually, when the supply is this low, demand is still high, it's going to keep upward pressure on prices. That's the takeaway. So here we are at 3%. As you can see, all the way back to 1999, we follow this line. The past 2 years and almost 3 has been below, every year up until the past 3 has been well above what we have over the average of the last 3 years. And if you think there's a bunch of inventory, you'd have to make the argument here that a bunch of inventory was about to hit the market or coming into the market to really even out that supply-demand balance, and it's just not in the cards. The total number of building permits here, new housing starts, and this is brand new inventory coming to market. This isn't necessarily resales. This is like builders building new housing for people. Number of building starts, permits taking out, and units completed is like either flat or down, especially this last quarter. So there's just nothing here to show us evidence-wise that like new housing is going to be able to fill this huge gap in the demand for the housing market that exists right now. All right, another big reason why this is not 2008, our lending standards are much tighter and way more in control. We used to say, back before I was in the game, this is right when I was in college and graduating, but following the housing market because I grew up in a family of realtors, they used to say it was harder to not get a loan than it was to get a loan back right before the housing market and the economy took a big dump. This is the historical data for the MCAI, the Mortgage Credit Availability Index. You can see it was super high over here, almost to the 900 mark. And now, since then, since they started reining that in and coming up with new laws for lenders to make sure that this doesn't happen again, it's been much lower. And here we are at, basically an eighth of that mortgage credit availability than we were, that caused the big problem. Foreclosure activity, this is another huge statistic and not a new one if you've been following me, but I like to point this out again because this is a big reason why the housing market was really bad back then. There was a lot of people that did not have very much equity or any equity in the houses that they were buying or the houses that they owned, which led to a huge, I don't want to call it a bubble, but a huge rise of foreclosure activity right before, around, during, and after 2008. And now people own much more, they have a much more vested interest. They have a lot more equity in their homes, and foreclosure activity has dropped by, what is this, 151,000 compared to almost 3 million here in the peak in 2010. So we are nowhere near, we're at a fraction of what the foreclosure filings were, back then. And I will admit and point out here, if you're making this argument in your own head, that there was a foreclosure moratorium during the pandemic, but that has been lifted since then, and home prices have remained high enough that people still have the equity in their houses, and the people that need to sell because they can't afford it anymore or lost their jobs are able to sell their house still at a profit, and not have to go into foreclosure because of that, which is very important when it comes to supply and how recessions and everything affect the housing market. So do keep that in mind. Downward trend there, big arrow, probably should have brought that up before. All right, mortgage rates projections here. So if this is another, looking at another argument that I hear is, mortgage rates are really high right now. I'm gonna wait for them to go back down to what they were. Don't hold your breath. Don't take that gamble because it's not. It's probably not going to pan out, and it's not really going to be worth it. So the projections here by four of the biggest people in the mortgage game, and I would like to think that these guys are objective, and they probably are because it doesn't help them to give us false data here. So we're looking at Q4 and over the next 4 quarters. So this is the next year. This is what people are projecting where mortgage rates are going to end up in a year. Oh, excuse me. Let's go back. Freddie Mac is saying they're going to go from about 5.4 down to about 5 at the end of the next 12 months. Fannie Mae is about on par here. And what I'm looking at is this. The average of all four people are projecting that it's going to come down a little, but the new norm and what's going to happen, at the end of whatever is happening right now, I'm not necessarily calling it a recession, but it might be. Mortgage rates probably have peaked a couple months ago when they were in the sixes. They're going to stay here while it's volatile, and we'll see daily increases and decreases in mortgage rates. But then when the dust settles on whatever is happening in the economy right now, when we do finally get inflation under control one way or another, mortgage rates are still going to remain higher than they were at the beginning of the year and a year ago because they were artificially low. All right, 3 big reasons to buy a home today. Fewer multiple offer scenarios. So if you're a buyer in the market, maybe you were over the past couple of years and you decided to just keep renting, don't get discouraged because multiple offer scenarios are decreasing. And this is nationwide. This is really, a general set of data here, and each neighborhood is going to be a little bit different. But what we see here is a trend going April, May, June of this year, nationwide average of 5.5 offers. And then the next month in May, 4.2. And in June, at the end of June, was wrapping up at about 3.5 offers. So the amount of people going after the same property is coming down. So your chances are getting better. Just be prepared. So is my biggest advice. Fewer homes selling above asking price, which is good news for everyone. I mean, the way homes were appreciating and increasing in value since mid 2020, after the big shutdown of the pandemic and people started restrictions were loosened and people started moving all over the country and buying new places. We were at about 12 to 15% appreciation, depending on where you were in the country, like year over year. We saw housing prices just go crazy high, all these multiple offer scenarios. So that was, I guess good if you had just bought a house in maybe 2019, 2018 and decided to sell it then, but it's unsustainable. We really don't like to see that kind of growth over a long period of time. And we're not. So what we're seeing now is that home price appreciations, instead of going like this, are now leveling off. And what we're expecting is, more moderate appreciation, steady growth around 3 or 4% over the next several years, which is good because housing prices are still going to go up. You buy today, in a year, 2 years, your equity is going to go up. The price of your home, the value of your home is steadily going to go up. It's not going to come down. But what we're seeing here, percentage of homes, going back to this middle chart, going above asking is decreasing, which is good. Good for everyone. And the supply of homes for sale is growing, albeit slowly, as there are less buyers in the market, as interest rates have gone up and forced people to maybe just renew their lease or decide to stay in the home that they own for a little while longer. Things are staying on the market a little bit longer. So month over month, as a little bit of new stuff comes on the market, less of the inventory from the previous market sold, and it makes its way into that next month. So it is increasing slightly, but as we saw, a few slides ago, it's going to be a long time before inventory comes to an even point with demand. But the good news is it is steadily rising. So your chances of getting a home here are better if you're in the market for buying. And so I'm gonna bring this right back to my original question for you. Really think about it. Are you believing the gossip that you hear, or are you following the data? There is a lot of other data points, a lot of other stuff I could point out, but I want to keep this kind of brief. If you have your own questions, or if you want to challenge me on any of this stuff, or have your own, facts, data, numbers that you're following that is contradictory, I would love to hear it. Honestly, like I want to hear what you guys are hearing. This is a conversation I really like to have. So, bring it to me however you can. My contact information. Um, feel free to. I feel free to share it with any of you guys. I appreciate everyone that reaches out to me. You can reach me on my cell phone, call or text me at 617-851-9141, or you can reach me on my email, brian.mccarthy@compass.com. I hope this was informative and valuable to you all. Thank you so much for joining me on another episode of Market Monitor. Hope everyone's having a great month, and I will see you soon on the next episode. Thanks.